All right, you guys, we got FOMC live approaching in about 4 minutes. I'll bring it to you guys live this time. We have some insight on some things that we do have, such as, the death cross on SPY, the VIX approaching bullish sentiment. So this may be one of the biggest FOMCs that we have, and it's so big to be quite honest. Hopefully you guys can hear me pretty well, but it's so big to be quite honest that I decided to make this my first live video and get some reactions for myself off of it. And we'll be placing this video on a documentary if it does go down in the fashion that we do believe that it could possibly go. If it doesn't go down, that's quite okay as well, because we've properly hedged ourselves. In situations like this, we really don't like to play FOMC too much. But the pressure on the market right now, it just leaves us with almost no choice but to go ahead and take advantage of this moment. Plus the current moment that we're in, it gives us the opportunity to bag a few dollars off of this FOMC that we have upcoming in 3 minutes and to place into some potential long-term plays, right? So just as we are, the people that follow us, for the most part, the guys are aware that, we make very high percentage plays. And the plays that we get in, normally we have a high percentage turnout in those because we like to properly, place ourselves in position with hedges. And we like to get out at certain entry and exit points that allow us to get out with proper risk management. So for those of you all that are here right now, glad that you all are here. We got approximately 2 minutes before FOMC. We may see a lot of movement to occur in the beginning of it. And when big moves happen, usually you may get 2 moves. The first move may be a head fake. So I want you guys to be aware and pay attention to that as we do approach that at this present moment. Just a quick kicker before we do get there. I want you guys to be aware that we do like O'Reilly, right, as one of the big hitters. So we took a look into O'Reilly. So if any of you guys are aware of, how to get option contracts, you want to look at O'Reilly, and you may want to consider getting yourself a contract that works in your favor. All right. We got 1 minute left, right? We got 1 minute left. Got the market also showing on the daily a potential head and shoulder pattern, which is also a bearish pattern, that if you zoom out at the end of the day, it may be something you could look at, and you may be able to say, hey, this is something that I actually seen, coming forth, right? Finch. Is that Ron Finch? What's up, man? I believe that's Ron Finch. Yeah, you got 1 more minute, man. Hey, if your palm's not sweating, it should be now. This could be an opportunity for you to gain a few dollars right here. Okay. What's up, Ron? Yeah, this is my first YouTube live video, Ron. We got FOMC, which is a very big money maker. Also, with that being said, it's now 1:30. We want to keep an open eye for Jerome Powell. So we want to see what he says on that. You guys looking like the market is starting to rebound. Want to keep an open eye for any potential fake outs. On the flip side, we have Apple calls because Apple got beat up. So it's very smart and invasive to get an Apple call just in case we do get upward push. Looks like that's what's happening right now. Keep in mind, FOMC, you may have two moves initially on that. All right, doesn't mean the first move is going to be the correct move, but you want to most definitely be aware and move diligently according to what you believe may happen. All right, cool. All right, we're getting some good movement to the upside right now. Usually it takes JP, that's Jerome Powell, a few minutes to get into the meeting before he says the things that may trigger the market to move in a certain way. We are aware that the market is currently approaching the death cross with potential. So either move that happens, it has to be a big move. and glad that we're here to be able to present it to you guys. If this move does happen to the north side, once again, we're structured with Apple calls because Apple was oversold. We also have a few calls in Lucid Automotive. Lucid is a very inexpensive stock that you could purchase to catch a ride or the wave up if the wave is upward that we make right here. This is going to be big because if it does move in the favor of rate cuts, small businesses are the ones that will benefit for the most part, the biggest, right? And what better company to have your money into in Lucid, other than Lucid right now? All right. A little stagnant right now. Still waiting on a big move. I'm gonna hold off, man, because I believe that the move that's gonna happen is gonna make us a crazy ton of money, and it would be great to have this on a live video. This is why I'm doing live today, man. So the move is moving up quite vigorously. Going up, already up $5 today on SPY. Let's go take a look at Apple. Apple is around 215 right now. Let's go take a look at Lucid. Ticker symbol LCID. Lucid looks to be creating that bull flag, man. We're looking for a $3 price target short term on Lucid, man. $3, $3.30. Got a couple contracts on Lucid. Real easy money that way. It's such a cheap, inexpensive. It's such a cheap and inexpensive stock that you can afford just about the shares, you know. All right, cool. So for today, we kind of net even. We up $1,000 right now for the day. Easy money. Easy money. I'm looking at LCID as one of our big movers potentially. Taking advantage of this. Looking at hedging the market with UVIX, which is a short call for the VIX. Chris Caleb, what it do, my guy? Looking for Mr. Powell to make some move, Jerome Powell that is, on the market. Like the VIX took a shot down. Want to be weary of that because we know the VIX can turn around in a flash, especially if we got big news. Not seeing too much movement at the present moment. What's up, Malachi? Chris Caleb, I see you guys in there. Yeah, thank you guys coming to the YouTube live. This is my first one doing, you guys. Wanted to do it to kind of catch something that could be something big, you know. Have it on YouTube. We usually do these things in our Discord for some of you all that's in here that's not a part of our Discord. But today we wanted to kind of give YouTube a test run on the FOMC. Right now, not too much movement. Usually we get real big movement on FOMC. We're looking for some of the information to come out to try to trigger that. See if we can find something that Jerome got on the internet. Thank you guys for taking a ride with me. All right, the market looking to take a rip up. But once again, you guys, once again, we're not going to be fooled by the sudden move. We're going to wait to see. We properly hedge ourselves in a fashion to where, you know, we actually kind of net even right now. I'm just up 1,000 right now at the present moment. All right, somebody says all right, cool. All right, the market starting to kind of cool off. Hey, like I said, you know, I mean, like, we want to be cool. We want to play it cool. We're not settling for the current moment because we still waiting on Jerome to post some stuff to actually trigger the market to move in a parabolic fashion. Check out Yahoo Finance, see if I can pull some of those numbers for you guys. All right, so some of you guys that are in the Discord and stuff like that, I just finalized my contract with Bill Gunderson. I'm gonna be talking about that into the class tonight. Bring it to you guys. I just finalized my contract with Bill Gunderson. It's gonna be small work. I'm gonna be writing for Seeking Alpha moving forward. All the paperwork is basically in line right now for us to go ahead and get that started. Just got to finalize the contract by agreeing to some of the terms, which are very nice. SPY currently is at $566. Fed rates hold steady, sees slower growth and higher inflation. All right, so they're holding inflation, they're holding the rate steady, they say. Not going up, neither down. Not going up or neither down. So with that being said, we probably got another month that we can wait on something big to happen. We were hoping that it happened today. I'm gonna pull up a stream of Jerome Powell to see what information we can pull up off Jerome. Then I'm gonna pull up some charts. Everybody's favorite is Lucid, so of course I'll pull up Lucid. After I do Lucid, I'll pull up the charts for the important things like Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, all of those things. All right. Even with it staying stagnant where it is, you guys, I would have imagined that the market would have taken a downturn, because even though good news right now should be bad news with the current state of the market. Now, whatever it's going to take, because keep in mind, some of you guys with us and some of you guys follow us, whatever it's going to take the market to continue in a path upward, is going to have to be something strong, because the current state of the market is due for a correction type event to headline what may happen, and we just simply don't have that. We have a downturn in some of the stocks, which places us in a correction phase, right? But we don't have that actual headline to give us to kind of support, the pullback that we have had thus far. So me, myself, like I said, like I mentioned, I like to be prepared, so I'm hedging myself with some plays that, can kind of leverage out the portfolio, right? And by doing so, if the market does go down, we're able to flip some of that leverage that we have into something that we can put back into our long-term plays, which you guys are also familiar with, right? So right now, the market is kind of leveling itself out. 565.61 is the current price of SPY. QQQ is kind of stagnant at the present moment. I'm going to go on a limb and say that I do believe that the market will have a downturn. There's no way that the market can continue to push upward with the information that was provided today, right? No way that we can push forward and push up with the information. We need some catastrophic information to allow us to continue upward. Otherwise, the market has already completed a death cross in several different time frames on several different ticker symbols. And as someone who does deep TA, I just expect the market to fall through, right? Don't care about none of the other stuff, none of the noise in the background. If I'm saying I'm an avid charter and the chart shows me a death cross, and we don't have any type of information that shows that the market can actually hold itself up at the present moment, I'm going to look for the chart to hold itself through. So right now at the present moment, It's sitting right up under resistance. Right. And man, like as you see with your own eyes, right? That resistance that we're taking with the volume, if you put into play all of the other integral parts of charting, if you just take charting serious and you only look at the charting aspects and you kind of cancel out the noise, you see that where we are presently, this resistance is going to push us down, right? And it's only healthy, right? It's healthy. It's something that we actually should look for, uh, that we should look for to happen if we do believe that the market is at a place where it could actually continue up and stay, moving in that fashion. So me, I'm going to remain in my calls in Apple, right, because it was severely beat up. I'm going to remain in my calls into Lucid, they're short term and long term. Uh, and I will continue to average into those long term. This is not financial advice by any means, but I'm going to continue to average into those long term Lucid contracts because if the market does take an upward turn, oh, what other stock would I rather have than one that is down 99%, my brothers and sisters, right? So with that being said, just looking to make a little money off a downturn right now. Hasn't happened yet, right? In fact, I could be down in that position. And we look to be up in the other positions, which is why we only use the stock picks to leverage out the account, right? Keep in mind when you purchase stocks such as the VIX and things of that nature, it should be with the mindset to either sell those, right? Sell those options, or either you should have the mindset that I'm using this as a short-term hedge, right? So at the present moment, we still kind of getting some stagnant moves. If it continues out in this fashion, I'm just gonna hold you guys. I'm just gonna hold overnight, see what happens, because a lot of times the market moves like this, which it hasn't really moved at all. It moves like this to kind of shake the tree a little bit, right? And I see what we see in the market's chart as a moment of opportunity, right? And this Chris Caleb, he says, sitting right up under the resistance. Yeah, and it's doing, what time frame were you up under? What does transitory mean? Basically, that the information that is being provided is visible to all. Where do you see the term transitory at? You looking on the 15? Okay, let me see if I can look at the 15-minute with you. All right. Market kind of moving. Yeah. I had some Apple calls this morning. They were up so high. They said Powell said that again that he would put with it. They said the word again and they put in it. Oh yeah. So transit. Okay, so that's what Powell said. Okay, when you were looking at the. Okay, so yeah. So usually transitory means it's just something that they're gonna let you know what's happening as it's happening, right? So they're being transitory with the market information, right? Let's see here. What is O'Reilly doing? O'Reilly staying stagnant. That hasn't moved at all. All right. Still looking for more movement, man. My portfolio is just kind of sitting still right now, in regards to the gains and losses, the P&L. Usually, on days like this, man, you get very, very big moves, man. I mean, even if you're looking at the market right now, one with the regular eye would say, hey, man, the move is pretty decent. But to be where we are, it's only a 1% move where the market is. I'm used to seeing probably 2.5% moves on days, even when they kind of remain stagnant, right? Sometimes, no news is considered good news, is what they like to say, right? So even where we are at the present moment, where it looks like it's moving a little bit, me with my eye, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. Let me see here. let's see if we can get some of this information on JP. All right, I'm gonna turn some of this up. Maybe you guys can hear some of it with me. Hold on one second.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's a feature that has been for some time a feature of this labor market. You have pretty high participation accounting for aging. You've got wages that are consistent with 2% inflation, assuming that we're going to keep getting relatively high productivity. We've got unemployment pretty close to its natural level. But the hiring rate is quite low, but so is the layoff rate. So you look at initial claims or layoffs, so you're not seeing people losing their jobs, but you're seeing the people who don't have a job having to wait longer and longer. And the question is, which way does that break? If we were to see a meaningful increase in layoffs, then that would probably translate fairly quickly into unemployment, because people are, it's not a big hiring market. We've been watching that, and it's just not in the data. It hasn't happened. What we've had is a low firing, low hiring situation, and it seems to be in balance now for the last 6, 7, 8 months. That's where we are. There's healthy levels of job creation too. So overall, it's a labor market that's in balance, and we watch it very carefully.
So then, have we seen the new administration's policies in the economic numbers yet? And when do you anticipate that happening?
In labor or in other?
In labor and inflation, just across the economy, have we started to see the new policies take effect in the numbers?
Only in a kind of an early way. I mean, it's only been a few months, right? For example, the layoffs that are happening here are, they're certainly meaningful to the people involved, and they may be meaningful to a particular neighborhood or region or area, but at the national level, they're not significant yet. But we don't know. We don't know how far that will go. We'll find out much more. I mentioned that you saw we've had two very strong goods inflation readings in the last 2 months, which is very unexpected. And I think hard to trace it to specific tariffs, but it must have something to do with, it's either noise and it'll come back, and that's very possible too. But if it is persistent, then it must be to do with people buying ahead of tariffs or raising prices ahead of tariffs and things like that. Those kinds of things happen, and they're very, very hard to capture. Because so much of it is indirect. A great example is their washing machines were tariffed in the last round of tariffs, and prices went up. But prices also went up on dryers, which were not tariffed. So the manufacturers they just kind of followed the crowd and raised it. So things happen very indirectly, and so there'll be a lot of work done in coming months to try to trace all that through. But ultimately, though, it's too soon to be seeing significant effects in economic data.
Craig Torres from Bloomberg News. Thanks, Chair Powell. You said transitory price increases from tariffs are the base case. Transitory is the base case. Wasn't it the base case last time? And didn't the FOMC forecast lower inflation ahead last time? And wasn't the lesson that it quickly got into services, haircuts, daycare, everything else? And so I'm just wondering why the 9 aren't taking that on board and are cutting twice this year.
When you say last time, are you talking about the last
Pandemic, yes. During the
because you
pandemic.
could have been talking about the last time there were tariffs, in which case the inflation was transitory. Yeah, no, of course we're well aware of that, and it's still the truth. If there's an inflationary impulse that's going to go away on its own, it's not the right policy to tighten policy, because by the time you have your effect, you're in effect that by design you are lowering economic activity and employment. And if that's not necessary, you don't want to do it. In real time, as we know, it's hard to make that judgment. And we're well aware, of what happened, obviously, with the pandemic inflation. But I mean, we have to look at this as it's a different situation. There are differences and similarities. I mean, it's a different time. We haven't had real price stability fully reestablished yet, and we have to keep that in mind. And we also we hear that people are very reluctant to take on, to allow prices to go up. At the same time, we hear that businesses are intending to pass many of these prices through. So it's hard to say how this is going to work out.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Thanks for taking my question, Mr. Chairman. The Bank of Canada, in its last policy statement, said monetary policy cannot offset the impacts of a trade war. What it can and must do is ensure that higher prices do not lead to ongoing inflation. I wonder if that kind of reflects your own sense of prioritization faced with higher prices and weaker growth, that the idea is you have to take care of inflation.
So we have two goals, right? We have maximum employment and price stability, and we have to balance those. And there can be situations in which they're in tension, right? And we actually have a provision in our consensus statement that says what we should do in that case. That's a very challenging situation for any central bank, and certainly for us. And so what we say that we'll do is we'll look how far each of those two goals is, each of those two measures is from its goal. And then we'll ask how long we think it might take to get back to the goal for each of them, and we'll make a judgment, because our tools work in one direction. We're either tightening or loosening. So it's a very challenging situation. Let me say, we don't have that situation right now. That's not where the economy is at all. It's also not where the forecast is. I don't know any mainstream forecast that really shows significant problems like that.
Well, just to follow up, yesterday the UCLA Anderson forecast said there's a high probability of a recession. Where do you stand on whether or not the slowdown you're seeing creates a higher probability or concern that you may have on recession? Thank you.
There's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. It might be broadly in the range of 1 in 4 at any time. If you look back through the years, there could be within 12 months a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So the question is whether this current situation, those possibilities are elevated. I will say this: we don't make such a forecast. If you look at outside forecasts, forecasters have generally raised, a number of them have raised their possibility of a recession somewhat, but still at relatively moderate levels, still in the region of the traditional, because they were extremely low. If you go back 2 months, people were saying that the likelihood of a recession was extremely low. So has moved up, but it's not high.
Chris.
Hi, thank you. Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. As you know, I guess last night President Trump fired 2 members of the Federal Trade Commission, an independent agency, and this could cause the kind of legal fight about the administration's power to fire independent people. If those firings stand, is that a threat to the Fed's independence? Could he do the same thing to the Fed board?
So I think I did answer that question in this very room some time ago, and I no desire to change that answer, and I have nothing new for you on that today.
Well, maybe I'll have another mulligan. As you know, I wanted to go back to the consumer sentiment, particularly the inflation expectations in the University of Michigan survey. In the summer of 2022, you cited the rise in the long-term inflation expectations in that index as the reason that you went big with a 3/4 point hike. So I know you've talked about all the different measures now, but you seem to not be placing the same weight on that. And so I'm just wondering, are you dismissing what we saw last week from the University of Michigan, or does that carry the same weight as it did in the past?
So I mentioned it back then, but in no way did I place a huge weight on it. I think that was a ex post story, but it wasn't the case. That was a preliminary reading, and so is this. And it's also, this is that Michigan, the one you're referring to, the longer term thing. We look at it, we don't dismiss data that we don't like, we force ourselves to look at it, but it is an outlier compared to market-based and compared to other survey-based assessments of longer run inflation expectations. So we got to keep that in mind. And I would just say we look at all of them, and that one's kind of an outlier, but nonetheless we take notice of it.
Michael
McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television.
There's a worry on Wall Street that when you say you want to study the net effect of the fiscal policies we may see on the economy, that you would end up waiting too long and be behind the curve in responding to any downturn. How can you reassure people that you can spot a problem early enough unless you decide to be preemptive?
Good question.
Yeah, look, we're aware of we're well aware of how things are going to evolve and the timeframes and all that. And, we will use our tools to foster achievement of our goals to the best we can. And of course, we're going to try to be timely with that. For right now, the hard data are pretty solid. We are obviously aware of the soft sentiment data and high uncertainty. And we're watching that carefully, and we think it's a good time for us to wait for further clarity before we consider adjusting our policy stance.
Do you think it's going to be hard to get clarity in a government by tweet? I mean, do you have a feeling that at some point you actually will have a forecast you can trust?
Yes, I think we will. It's hard to say when that will be. These decisions are going to be made, and they're going to be implemented, and then we'll know. At that point, we'll know what the decisions are, and we'll have to make assessments then about the implications for the economy. Those things will happen. A lot of them will happen over the course of, in coming months, certainly over the course of this year, and we'll be adapting as we go.
And Jerome Powell is fair.
Hi, Chair Powell. Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Thank you for taking our questions. At the beginning, you were talking about separating the signal from the noise and tariff inflation from non-tariff inflation. Can you walk us through what that looked like over the last couple of months, if there were specifics from the January meeting to now that helped you make those distinctions?
So when we say separating the signal from the noise, that's just a way of saying that things are highly uncertain, and that you're reading about developments. The news is full of developments of tariffs being put on and taken off and things like that. Some of that is noise in the sense that it's not really telling you anything. You're trying to extract a signal from that, and the signal is what's going to be the effect on economic activity, on inflation, on employment, and all those things. So that's really when we say signal and noise. Sorry, the second thing was...
Or similarly for tariff inflation, non-tariff inflation, ways that you're making the distinction.
That's sort of a special case of that. With the idea being, and I do think that the first 2 months of this year are a great example. You've got high readings for goods inflation after a string of readings that average close to zero. And you have to ask, it's coming during tariffs, but you can't. It's very hard to actually scientifically go back and match up those increases and say, yes, I can prove that that's from tariffs, but it kind of has to be to some extent. Plus noise. There can be idiosyncratic readings in various categories, which will shortly reverse, and that happens too, and that could be a big piece of it. I think we'll know in a couple of months. We'll know whether those were, where that really was from. But that's another case where I think it's going to be very, very challenging to unpack the inflation that we see over the course of this year and be able to say with confidence how much of that came from inflation and how much of it, from tariffs, and how much of it didn't. But that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing that, and so will everybody else, and we'll all be trying very hard to make that assessment. And I'm sure we will make a lot of progress on that, and we already have. But it's going to be a challenge.
Do you have a sense yet as to what, in your mind, would make something cross from noise to a signal, what that threshold would look like?
It would depend on what we're talking about. I mean, obviously, you're looking for direct evidence that particular pieces of inflation are or are clearly not caused by tariffs. For example, if it's something that was, in the service sector that was far away from anything that's tariffed, you might think, okay, well, that is, like, frankly, housing services inflation, which by the way has been behaving well, which for some time was kind of our problem. Now it's slow, but it's definitely moving down in a very good way.
Most definitely is.
With goods and to some extent with non-housing services inflation.
What about commercial?
Thanks for taking our questions, Chair Powell. Kelly O'Grady, CBS News. So consumer sentiment has dipped dramatically, but you say the economy and the hard data is still solid. What is your message to consumers that clearly disagree and don't feel that strength?
Come on now.
The hard data they're looking at is their grocery bill.
There we go.
Okay, so a couple things. The grocery bill is about past inflation, really. There was inflation in 21, 2, and 3, and prices went up. The current level, it's not the change in prices, it's they're unhappy, and they're not wrong to be unhappy that prices went up quite a bit, and they're paying a lot for those things. So I think that is the fundamental fact, and has been for a long time, a couple of years, why people are unhappy with the economy. It's not that the economy is not growing. It's not that inflation is really high. It's not that unemployment is high. It's none of those things. We have 4.1% unemployment. We've got 2% growth, and it's a pretty good economy. But people are unhappy because of the price level, and we completely understand and accept that.
And just to follow up, why are you still projecting 2 rate cuts this year if your own projections show inflation higher for longer? Does that mean you see a slowdown in economic growth as a real threat?
Ooh, I like her.
So I think
Great
we
question.
came into this with at the December meeting, the median was 2 cuts. The median was, and so you come in and you see, broadly speaking, weaker growth but higher inflation, and they kind of balance each other out. So you think
Short term.
unemployment is there's really only a 1/10 change. So there's just not a big change in the forecast. There really isn't. Modest, meaningfully higher growth and meaningfully higher inflation, which call for different responses, right? So they cancel each other out, and people just said, okay, I'm going to stay here. But the second factor is it's so highly uncertain. Is just, we're sitting here thinking, and we
Don't do that.
we obviously are in touch with businesses and households all over the country. We have an extraordinary network of contacts that come in through the reserve banks and put in the beige book, and also through contacts at the board. And we get all that, and we do understand that sentiment has fallen off pretty sharply, but economic activity has not yet. And so we're watching carefully.
Yeah,
So
because
I would
everybody
tell you
not bankrupt.
that the economy seems to be healthy. We understand that sentiment is quite negative at this time, and that probably has to do with turmoil at the beginning of an administration that's making big changes in areas of policy, and that's probably part of it. I do think the underlying unhappiness people have about the economy, though, is more about the price level.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. I wanted to ask, first of all, if you could clarify, you were talking about how tariffs were a good part of the uptick in the inflation forecast, and I was just wondering what that specifically refers to. Is that the tariffs that have already been put in place? Is that anticipating some of the tariffs that might be coming on April 2nd? And then also, if you wouldn't mind, talking a little more about the balance sheet decision and what drove that. Did that have anything to do with expectations of how raising the debt ceiling might affect the reserve supply?
Yeah, so in the SEP, you'll see that there's not further progress on core inflation this year. We're kind of flatlining, going sideways. We don't ask people to write down how much of this is from tariffs and how much of it is not, but some of it is from tariffs. We know that tariffs are coming in core PCE inflation, core CPI inflation this year, without exception. I'm not aware of an exception. So it's in there. I can't tell you how much of that it is. In terms of the balance sheet, so yeah, I think, I guess the way I'd say it is, it was the flows in and out of the TGA that got us thinking about it. But as we thought about it, we really came to the view that this was a good time to make the move that we made. And broadly, committee that came around to the view that we would do the same thing we'd already done, which is I guess in June, whenever it was, we lowered the pace of QT, and we're just going to do that again. We're going to cut it roughly in half. And the sense of that is, if you're cutting the pace of QT roughly in half, then the runway is probably doubled. Okay, so it's going to be slower for longer. And people really like that. People thought that's a good idea. It's like a plane. You can think of it like a plane coming in for a landing. As we get closer, and by the way, we still think that reserves are abundant. although you begin to see some of the things we look at begin to react a little bit, but we still think that they're abundant. Now, of course, now the TGA is emptying out, so reserves are higher now, so you can't really see the underlying signal. So we came around to the view, and it had a lot of appeal, and so we did it. It has no implications at all for monetary policy. It has no implications at all for the ultimate size of the balance sheet. It isn't sending a signal in any hidden way that you can try to tease out. It's just not there. We're basically, it's very consistent with our plans and our practices that we've published and that we've followed since we began this, what is a very successful rundown of the balance sheet. Again, the second time that we've slowed the pace, and we've said that we would stop when we were somewhat above the level we judge as ample. And clearly we're not at that level yet, but we're going to be approaching it more slowly. It's a common sense kind of a thing, and it had pretty broad appeal, I will say.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. You said in January, Chair Powell, that inflation expectations remained well anchored. Would you still say they remain well anchored today? And just to reiterate the question others have asked, if they're not so well anchored, why hasn't there been a more radical shift to the policy path today? Thank you.
So when we talk about inflation expectations being well anchored, we're talking about longer run inflation expectations. And they really haven't moved much. I mean, if at all. There's one reading that everyone's focusing on that's higher, but the other survey readings and the market-based readings all show relatively, well anchored inflation expectations. You would expect.
What happens to the volume? We in some Apple calls to hedge the market with. Right now we had like one of those. We had a couple of MSTRs, as we do know, those kind of go up pretty big when the market has a move upward.
Well anchored, we're really looking at longer terms, 5 year and out, and there's really no story to tell 5 years and out, either in market-based or in surveys. But we'll watch it. I mean, we're not we're not going to miss any evidence that longer term or medium term inflation expectations are moving.
Hi, Chair Powell. Neil Irwin with Axios. Treasury Secretary Bessent has observed that a large share of job growth over the last couple of years has been in what he calls government or government-adjacent sectors, healthcare, education. Do you agree that there's some weakness in underlying private job growth? And do you see the composition of job growth as something that has policy implications?
So that has been the case. We talked about that over the course of the last year. There were some good number of months and times when a lot of the job creation was concentrated in, educational institutions, healthcare, state governments, things like that. There were also times when private sector job growth has been moving in a healthy rate. I mean, they're all jobs, but and remember, we're at very low unemployment for quite a time now. So I think it's a good labor market, but it's something that we monitor carefully. From our standpoint, employment is employment. But the elected government is entitled to have, we don't have policies that address different kinds of employment, but the elected government has a different role, and they can have those.
Turn to a quick QT question. Does the committee envision at some point tapering the MBS runoff as well?
I think tapering it, I don't know. There's no plan to do that. At a certain point, we'll stop runoff. And we may or may not stop MBS runoff, though, because, we want to stop runoff in net at some point. We haven't made any decisions about that. We want the MBS to roll off our balance sheet. We really strongly desire that. So, but we haven't made any decisions about that. I think we'd look carefully at letting that keep going, but hold the overall size of the balance sheet in, constant at some point, a point that we're not at yet.
Simon.
Simon Rabinovich with The Economist. Thank you, Chair Powell. Several times today you said that you feel you're well positioned to wait for greater clarity. At the same time, you could point to quite a few growth risks at the moment. We've seen a stock market that's gone quite wobbly, rapidly cooling housing sales, plunging confidence surveys. Today, not only did the S&P mark down the growth outlook, 17 of 19 see risks to the downside. So my question is, how confident are you that you're well positioned, or is that one more thing that you're uncertain about?
I'm confident that we're well positioned in the sense that we're well positioned to move in the direction we'll need to move. I don't know anyone who has a lot of confidence in their forecast. I mean, the point is we are at, we're at a place where we can cut, or we can hold what is clearly a restrictive stance, a policy. And that's what I mean. I think that's well positioned. Forecasting right now, forecasting is always very, very hard, and in the current situation, I just think uncertainty is remarkably high.
And sorry,
Okay.
Standing here today, would you be surprised to pivot back towards rate cuts in May?
I think we're not going to be in any hurry to move, and as I mentioned, I think we're well positioned to wait for further clarity, and not in any hurry.
He ain't telling you shit.
Matt Egan with CNN. Thank you, Chair Powell. The Fed statement released today removed the line that previously said the committee judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance. Can you explain the decision to remove that line? Does it mean that you're now more concerned about inflation or about employment?
Actually, it does not mean either of those things. Sometimes with language, it lives its useful life, and then we take it off, and that was the case here. There's really not meant to be any signal here. Over the past year, conveying the sense of the balance of risks was important, that they be in balance or close to being in balance. That was useful as we approached liftoff, if you remember. But we're past that. I'm sorry, no, beginning to cut. So we just took it out. I actually would say that the more important thing now about risks, and this is in the pages like 10, 11, 12 of the SEP, if you look, participants widely raised their estimate of the risks of uncertainty, but also the risks to growth and our employment and inflation mandates. That's a more salient point now than whether they're in balance.
Just on the stock market, the stock market has obviously declined significantly since the Fed last met. Are you concerned at all about some of the market volatility having a real economic impact in terms of hurting business spending or consumer spending, especially among higher income households?
So financial conditions matter to us because, financial conditions are the main channel to the real economy through which our policy has its effects. So they're important. But what matters from a Fed standpoint for the macro economy is material changes to overall financial conditions that are persistent, that last for a while, long enough to actually affect economic activity. So that's what we're looking for. I'm not going to opine on the appropriate level of any market, equity, debt, commodities, or anything like that. And I would just point you to the bigger picture again. The real economy, the hard data, are still in reasonably good shape. It's the soft data, it's the surveys that are showing, significant concerns, downside risks, and those kind of things. We don't dismiss that. We're watching it carefully, but we don't want to get ahead of that. We want to focus on the hard data. If that's going to affect the hard data, we should know it very quickly, and of course we'll understand that. But you don't see that yet.
Jennifer. Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. As you look to navigate higher inflation and lower growth, the Fed has talked about heeding the lessons from the 1970s. Is the Fed willing to have a recession if it means breaking the back of inflation?
And I said recession about 5 times.
Fortunately,
the market showed that this is about to go down. This is the 240.
Seeing inflation move down from
the market is about to go down
to pretty close to 2%, while the unemployment rate has remained very
They
consistent.
keep
with
talking
what
about the stock market because there's no way that this can hold up.
inflation coming in from an exogenous source, but the underlying inflation
No way.
before that was, basically 2.5% inflation, I would say, and 2% growth and 4% unemployment. So that's what we did. That's what together the economy accomplished. So I don't see any reason to think that we're looking at a replay of the 70s or anything like that. Underlying inflation is still running in the twos, with probably a little bit of a pickup associated with tariffs. So I don't think we're facing, I wouldn't say we're in a situation that's remotely comparable to that.
And last month, the idea of a Doge dividend was proposed, which would send $5,000 checks to every taxpayer from Doge savings. President Trump and Elon Musk have supported this. There's reports there could be a bill introduced on Capitol Hill. What impact might that have on household savings and spending in terms of your growth and outlook for inflation?
It's not appropriate for me to speculate on
I don't know nothing about it.
ideas or fiscal policy for that matter. So I'm gonna pass on that one. Thank you.
Smart.
Hi, Chair Powell. Daniel Avis from Agence France Presse. You mentioned that tariffs are already having at least some impact on inflation. I'm just wondering how you and your colleagues on the FOMC have been thinking about the possibility of retaliatory tariffs from other countries, especially with April the 2nd coming up. Was it something you considered during this meeting? Thanks.
So since the very beginning, we've had kind of a placeholder. The staff has a placeholder of a range of possible outcomes from tariffs and from trade policy generally, and they generally assume full retaliation in those, and so that's kind of baked into the numbers. What happens? It will be complicated, and there will be some retaliation and some not, and all that. But ultimately, they're trying to, with the placeholder, give us a broad sense of what this might look like. When we actually know the specifics, we'll be able to have still uncertain but better informed forecasts. So yes, that's in there.
Last question goes to Jean. Hi, Chair Powell. Jean Young with MNI Market News. Had a couple questions on the balance sheet change that you made. So the minutes had initially described your discussion on slowing QT as temporary until the debt ceiling is resolved. But from what you said earlier, it doesn't sound like there's a desire to kind of regain the pace of QT that we have at the moment after the debt ceiling is resolved. Is that the case?
Yeah, so we looked at pausing and we looked at slowing, and really people came together very strongly behind slowing, not pausing, for a variety of reasons. And so people really came to be, pretty strongly in favor of this move. Slows down the path and probably lengthens it, doubles it effectively by slowing it by half. That people thought that's a good place to be. It'll help us assure that this path is a smooth one as we get closer and closer to that. So that's how that came about.
Well, I guess my question is more, was that meant to be a temporary measure during the debt ceiling episode, or?
It was the TGA flows, Treasury General Account flows, that got us thinking about this. But the more we thought about it, we came around to this. And it is, yes, it was provoked. The original discussion was provoked by that. But I think what we came up with, though, was broader than that and different than that. It does address that issue, but it really is also, it fits in really nicely with our principles and our plans and the things we've done before and the things we said we would do. So that's why, pretty strong support. I'd just say it's nothing to do with monetary policy, nothing to do with the size of the balance sheet. It's just kind of a common sense adjustment as you get closer and closer. Let's slow down a little bit again, and that way we'll be more and more confident that we're getting where we need to get. You can take our time getting there. We're shrinking the balance sheet every month, and we think it was a good play, as I mentioned, well supported. Thanks very much.
That's a wrap. All right, you guys. So what we got out of that is basically stagnation. What they do believe, they're gonna want to see more information from what is happening in regards to job creations, because they're seeing some job no retention is job loss right now, right? They're also seeing that the market is kind of responding well to some of the implementations of the of what has happened over the previous month since the last one, right? So I guess you could say, you know, you're looking for things to continue on in the path that they have, and the path that they've been on has been a bearish path, right? So they're going to need to find a way to, you know, make this balance of things, you know, a little bit better. And I just don't foresee nothing other than a crash, or at least somewhat of a more of a pullback to help balance things out. So I don't want to say too much more than what they spoke on. I want to, you know, most definitely moved after their moves, right? So we want to ride the coattail of things. You know, we're being somewhat moving in reflection of what we see, right? So with that being said, nothing much to take out of what they were speaking out on. So we'll kind of look into the charts, right? See what the chart shows us, you know, as we like to say, take it back to the chart, right? See what we can find, you know, and reassess, right? Sometimes the best moves are no moves. We made a move on Apple this morning. We were able to get 200% and we got on out of there. We ran some runners. The runner right now is still up 24%, right? So overall, good day. You know, we were hoping that we could have capitalized potentially off of a rate hike that may have allowed the death cross to complete itself, but it didn't do that. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean that, you know, that's the end of that potentially, but we want to take, you know, more so of a side of caution when it comes to, you know, the thought of that, you know, rate hike. We also want to keep in mind that usually we bounce off of that, you know, 50 and 200 MA, right? So this could be another bounce off of that. But, you know, if you ask me, like I say, we're too far away from it for the candlesticks of SPY, that is, for this just to be somewhat of some neutral information. So I'm going to swing my puts over into tomorrow, potentially into Friday, to see how things kind of correspond to what we do believe, because we're looking at the chart. We're not jumping in blindly off of information. We're using the chart as a lead, right? We're using the chart as a lead. And that lead tells us actually that we're supposed to be in negative territory. We made our bounce off of the 550 like we represented earlier. We're approaching back towards that moving average that we now see is used as resistance. So if all does kind of play itself out, maybe they faked out the market. Maybe they faked out some people that were waiting on this news, but it's not going to fake me out. I'm watching and I'm continuing to watch. Absolutely. Yeah, you got to put, yeah, we're going to, hey, and we've been down this path before, right? We know that a lot of the times that we may see some things, it may not happen on our time or exactly, you know, when we say it may occur, but we do know the chart for the most part has been pretty much accurate. So if we're looking for the chart to play out, we understand that the death cross has happened. And we know that the biggest part of the death cross is after that cross happens, usually you get a very big red candle that you can make some money off of, right? And we're just looking for that candle to happen. After that candle happens, you know, they can have whatever they want in the market, you know, but what we'll do is we're already gonna, you know, we're gonna strategically place ourselves in a position to take some of that cash, and we're gonna be ready to make some moves that we do believe that show us with high favor according to our charts. Well, I want to thank everybody that took the opportunity to come in today. This is my first live video on YouTube. I was hoping for more of an outcome that we would have been able to show, you know, the chart kind of predict, you know, what happened, but, you know, a little bit of stagflation. Actually, it went up. It deviated from where we do believe, which actually does create, if you looked at it from the inverse side, a trampoline opportunity for us to kind of go down on some stocks and up on the inverse stocks. So with that being said, you know, I guess I'll leave you guys with a little bit of information today. I want you to check out a dividend stock. That dividend stock, I'm not promoting it or anything. I just want you to take a look at it as QQQI, right? QQQI, like igloo, queen, igloo. And that stock is a dividend stock that yields one of the highest percentages out there. That's just free game I got for some of you guys. It's a brand new stock. It came out 2024. I had the opportunity to review it. I also had the opportunity to check out some of the ex-dividend dates. It pays out as twice as much as a dividend that I like to give out to people or to give people advice to, which is Main Street Capital. So if you take a look at that, once again, it's QQQI. It's going to be a very great, return for you if it's something that you can kind of throw or use as like a savings account, right? Get you some of that money back with the dividends and drip it. Other than that, I want to say thank you guys for spending every second with me because every second counts. Thank you very much for coming. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.